Chapter 1. The House That Never Called Me Home. I was not driving home for comfort. I was driving home because somewhere inside me still believed family meant safety. I am Marina Caldwell, 37, a Navy officer who learned how to stand her ground long before she ever learned how to belong. In my family, love came with conditions, silence was rewarded, and questioning anything made you the problem. I believed my wedding would finally bring us together. I did not know my own family had already decided to humble me, rewrite my place, and cross a line they could never walk back from. That belief stayed with me as I drove back toward the place I once called home. The highway signs started looking familiar about 20 miles out, the kind of familiar that did not feel like comfort, more like the moment you spot a bruise in the mirror and realize it never really went away. Salt air seeped through the vents even with the windows up. The sky was wide and pale, the late afternoon sun turning the marsh grass along the road into copper. My name is Marina Caldwell. I am 37, and I have spent most of my adult life learning how to keep my face steady when my chest is doing something else entirely. The Navy taught me that. So did my family. I had been gone long enough that I could name every version of myself by duty station. Norfolk, San Diego, a stint overseas that I still do not talk about unless I have to. I had built a life that made sense in clean lines and clear expectations. You show up on time, you do your job, you own your mistakes, you do not get to rewrite reality because it feels inconvenient. Then I turned off the main road and headed toward Harbor Cove, North Carolina, and the old rules started crawling back under my skin. The wedding was in 5 days. My fiancé, Ethan Mercer, had offered to book us a little place near the waterfront, somewhere quiet where we could breathe before everything became schedules and relatives and matching outfits. I told him no. I said it would be easier if I stayed with my parents for a few nights, like a grown daughter coming home, like the kind of thing normal families did. Even as I said it, I felt the lie settle behind my teeth. My parents' house sat at the end of a narrow lane lined with live oaks. Spanish moss hung down like frayed rope. The paint was the same faded blue it had been since I was in high school. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, as if it had to think about whether I was worth the electricity. I cut the engine and sat with my hands on the steering wheel for a moment. The silence inside the car was thick, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair pulled back tight, no makeup, the uniform bag in the back seat, because old habits do not die just because you're on leave. I got out, smoothed my shirt like it mattered, and walked up the steps. The front door opened before I knocked. My mother was standing there as if she had been waiting in the exact same spot for an hour, her hands already busy on a dish towel that did not need drying. "Marina," she said, and her voice landed somewhere between greeting and assessment. She leaned in, kissed the air near my cheek, then leaned back to scan my face, my shoulders, my posture, like she was checking for stains. "Hi, Mom," I said. Behind her, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and something sweet baking. Familiar, but not warm. Familiar in the way a place can feel like it has been preserved in amber, and you are the only thing that has changed. My father called out from the living room. I heard the television volume dip. "That you, Marina?" "Yes, Dad," I called back. My mother stepped aside. "Shoes off," she said immediately, "and please do not drag sand in, I just mopped." I looked down at my boots, perfectly clean from a gas station stop where I had wiped them with a paper towel out of habit. I nodded anyway. The living room was exactly as I remembered it. Same heavy furniture, same framed photos lined up like evidence. Ethan and I had sent my parents an engagement photo months ago. It sat there on the mantel, angled slightly away from the center, like it didn't quite belong with the rest. My father was in his recliner. Graham Caldwell, 65, shoulders still broad from years of lifting and building and running his small supply business. He reached for the remote, muted the television, then looked at me like he was deciding what category to put me in today. "Well," he said, "you made it." "I did," I said. He stood, gave me a quick one-armed hug that felt more like a pat-down than affection, then stepped back and glanced at my hands. "How was work?" he asked, and before I could answer, he added, "Heard you all got another new commander up there. People keep coming and going these days." I opened my mouth. I wanted to tell him about the inspection we had just finished, about the junior sailor I mentored who finally made second class, about the way my division had pulled together after a rough stretch. I wanted to tell him that I was proud of what I had built, that I had earned my rank and my place. Instead, he kept talking. "I got a big order coming in next week," he said. "Lumber prices are all over the place. Folks out here can barely afford repairs anymore." My mother drifted toward the kitchen, still holding the dish towel like a shield. "Dinner will be ready soon," she said. "You must be starving." I followed her with my eyes and realized something I always realized when I came home. In this house, my life was a topic, not a reality, something they could touch lightly, then set back down before it left fingerprints. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. Footsteps. Then my brother appeared in the doorway like he had been here the whole time and simply decided to make himself visible. Kyle. 33, same sandy hair, same easy grin. He wore a shirt with the logo of Ridgeway Supply on it, the family business, the company my father talked about with reverence. Kyle walked in like the house belonged to him, like the whole town did. "Look who finally showed up, Navy girl." I stiffened before I could stop myself. The nickname had followed me since I signed enlistment papers at 19. Back then, it was said with a smirk. Now it was said like a verdict. "Hey, Kyle," I said. He came over, hugged me with one arm, then leaned back and glanced at my hands. "You still do that tight hair thing?" he said. "Makes you look like you're about to write someone up." I gave a small smile because that was what I was trained to do. Smooth things, keep the peace. He glanced at my suitcase by the door. "How long you staying?" he asked. "Just until the wedding, a few nights." Kyle whistled low. "Brave," he said, then laughed like it was a joke. My father chuckled, not quite a laugh, more like agreement disguised as humor. My mother called from the kitchen. "Kyle, don't start. Marina's tired." I waited for her to add something like, "I'm glad you're home," or "How are you really?" She didn't. Instead, she said, "I need you to help me set the table, Kyle." And then, "Marina, can you please not bring up stressful topics tonight? I just want things to be nice." Stressful topics, like my job, like my life, like anything that required them to see me clearly. I swallowed. "Sure, nice." As Kyle walked toward the kitchen, he bumped my shoulder lightly and said under his breath, "Don't get all sensitive, it's a joke." There it was, clean and familiar. The moment I felt something, they told me the problem was me. I carried my suitcase down the hall to my old room. My mother had kept it almost the same as if she expected the version of me that left for boot camp to come back any day now. The bedspread was the same pale quilt. A stack of neatly folded towels sat on the dresser. The closet smelled of cedar and dust. On the nightstand, I noticed a small framed photo of my high school graduation. My father and mother stood on either side of me. Kyle was in the front, grinning, wearing a baseball cap, looking like the center of the world. I remembered how my mother insisted he be in the photo because family is family. I remembered how nobody asked if I wanted a picture of just me. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a slow breath. The room felt like it belonged to someone else, like I had been erased from it and only the outline remained. My phone buzzed. "Ethan." "Made it," he texted. I typed back, "I'm here." He replied quickly, "Proud of you. Call me if you need me." I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary. It would have been easy to call, to hear his voice and let it steady me. But I didn't want to sound weak. I didn't want to admit that walking through my parents' front door felt harder than a lot of things I had done in uniform. I set the phone down and stood, unpacking slowly, lining up my toiletries on the dresser like a ritual. Control the small things when the big ones feel out of reach. When I walked back toward the kitchen, I heard voices. My mother's voice, soft, another woman's voice I recognized from childhood, a friend from church. Their words drifted through the window near the sink. "Linda," the other woman said, "you must be so relieved she's finally settling down." My mother laughed gently. "I just hope she doesn't make things awkward, you know. She has always struggled to fit in. She means well, but she can be a lot." My hand froze on the doorframe. The sentence hit me in the center of the chest, not like a punch, more like a slow press that steals your air. Struggle to fit in. As if it was a personality flaw, not a wound. As if the problem had always been me. I stepped back before anyone saw me. I stood in the hallway and let my face go still. My throat burned. For a moment, I felt 19 again, standing in my parents' kitchen, listening to them talk about me as if I was not a person, as if I was weather. Then I forced my shoulders down. I inhaled through my nose. I exhaled slowly. 5 days, I told myself. Just 5 days. People say weddings bring families together. They say love softens old edges. They say everything feels different once you are officially starting a new life. I wanted to believe that. So I walked into the kitchen, put on a small smile, and asked my mother where she wanted the plates, as if I had not heard a single word. Chapter 2. When they started telling my story for me. My mother did not look up from the counter when I spoke. She just pointed with the dish towel toward a stack of ceramic plates like I was an extra set of hands, not a daughter she had not lived with in nearly 2 decades. Dinner passed the way dinners always passed in that house. Conversations orbiting my father and my brother like planets that knew better than to break their own gravity. Graham talked about freight delays and contractors who never paid on time. Kyle complained about a customer who wanted a refund for lumber that warped in the rain, as if weather was something my father should have controlled. When I tried to add anything, even something harmless, it floated in the air for half a second and then vanished. Ethan called while I was rinsing my plate. I pressed accept with wet fingers and stepped into the hallway. "Hey," I said. "How was it?" he asked. "Normal," I said, and I heard my own voice flatten. I made it sound like a report. He paused. "Marina," he said quietly, "you do not have to stay there." I leaned my shoulder against the wall and stared at the framed family photos in the hallway. I was in some of them, barely. My brother was in all of them, front and center, like a constant. "I will be fine," I said. "It is only a few days." "If you need me to drive out tonight, I will," Ethan said. The thought was warm and impossible at the same time. I pictured my mother watching from the window, my father judging, Kyle making jokes. I pictured my own embarrassment. The old reflex rose up, the one that said, "Do not make it worse by needing something." "No," I said. "Get some sleep. I will call you tomorrow." I ended the call, then stood there for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the muffled sounds of my family laughing at something in the kitchen. The laughter did not include me, but it also was not meant to. That was the part that hurt. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant caw of gulls outside. I made coffee, washed the mug immediately after, then wiped the counter even though it was already clean. I moved through the kitchen like a guest trying to leave no trace. My mother came in wearing a robe, her hair still pinned from sleep. "You're up early," she said. "Always," I said. She nodded like that confirmed something she already believed. She poured herself coffee, then glanced at the calendar on the fridge, covered in reminders written in her neat, slanted handwriting. "We have church committee this afternoon," she said. "I want you to come with me. Just show your face. People have been asking. Asking what? I wanted to say. Asking why I left. Asking why I came back. Asking why I never became the kind of woman they could understand. Instead, I said, sure. We drove to the church later in her silver SUV. Harbor Cove Community Church sat back from the road with white siding and a little steeple that caught the sunlight. The parking lot was already filling. A few women in pastel cardigans stood by the entrance, their hands clasped around iced coffees, their laughter bright and contained. As soon as we got out, I felt it. Not hostility exactly, something more slippery. Attention. A woman I recognized from childhood, Mrs. Talbot, stepped forward with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Marina," she said, "honey, look at you." "Hi, Mrs. Talbot," I said. She tilted her head. "How are you doing being back?" she asked, like coming home was a medical condition. I kept my smile small. "Fine," I said, "just busy with wedding things." "Of course," she said, and her gaze flicked over my posture, my hands, my face, like she was reading a label. "You must be so used to being, well, structured." My mother laughed softly beside me. "Marina likes things a certain way," she said, like it was a cute quirk and not the reason I survived. Another woman joined, someone I didn't know well, maybe a friend of my mother's. She touched my arm lightly and said, "Your mom says you have really changed." Changed. The word landed with a weight that made my shoulders tighten. "People change," I said. The woman hummed as if that proved her point. "Well," she said, "as long as you can relax for the big day." Relax, like my body didn't know how. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and old hymnals. My mother walked ahead, greeting people, leaving me half a step behind. Conversation stopped when I came close, then restarted once I moved past. I heard my name once or twice, followed by a quick laugh, then silence. At the back of the fellowship hall, a woman with short gray hair was sorting paper programs into a neat pile. She looked up and her face brightened with genuine recognition. "Marina," she said, "it has been forever." Maggie Pierce. She had been the church secretary as long as I could remember. She used to slip me extra cookies at bake sales when my mother was too busy socializing to notice I was hungry. "Hi, Maggie," I said, and my voice softened without me meaning it to. It was the first moment all day that felt remotely human. "Come here," she said. "Let me see you. Lord, you have your grandmother's eyes." I smiled, and for a second my chest loosened. My mother called from across the room. "Maggie, can you make sure the rehearsal list is printed? We want everything simple, no fuss." Maggie waved. "Already done, Linda," she called back. Then she leaned closer to me and lowered her voice. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" I hesitated. "Fine," I said automatically. Maggie's eyes stayed on mine. There was a look there that made my stomach sink, like she knew something I didn't. "People are talking," she said gently. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Talking about what?" I asked. Maggie pressed her lips together as if weighing whether to answer. Then she sighed. "You know how it is here," she said. "Folks get a story and they hold on to it like it's scripture." "What story?" I asked. She glanced around, then spoke quietly. "Your mama has been telling people you've been, well, difficult, that you're distant, hard to connect with, not exactly easy." The words hit me like cold water. "She has been saying that?" I asked. Maggie winced. "For weeks, Marina, since before you even got back. I think she's nervous about the wedding, about how things will look. Your daddy, too. They want everything to go smooth." Smooth, that word again. Smooth meant controlled. Smooth meant no surprises. Smooth meant me fitting into whatever shape they needed. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I blinked hard. "Why would she do that?" I asked, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted. Maggie reached for my hand, squeezed once. "I don't think she realizes what it sounds like," she said. "In her mind, she's preparing people, managing expectations." managing expectations about her own daughter, like I was a risk, a storm on the horizon. My mother walked back toward us, her smile already in place. "Maggie, did you tell Marina where she should stand during the rehearsal? We want it quick and clean." Maggie straightened. "We were just catching up, Linda," she said. My mother touched my elbow. "Marina has always had trouble," she said lightly, "with, social things. She means well." I stared at her, the same words, the same tone, like she had practiced them until they sounded normal. "Mom," I said. She blinked, still smiling. "What?" I couldn't say, "Why are you making me the problem?" before I even walk into the room. I couldn't say, "Do you hear yourself?" Because Kyle and my father weren't there, because we were in the church, because the whole town felt like it was listening, even when it pretended not to. So I swallowed it and said, "Nothing." We left the church after the meeting. My mother chatted the whole way back to the car about flowers and folding chairs, about how we should keep the reception simple so no one got carried away. She sounded relieved, as if she had succeeded at something. When we got home, Kyle was in the driveway with the tailgate down on his truck. He was unloading boxes with the Ridgeway Supply logo on them. "Dad wants these delivered to the venue tomorrow," Kyle said. Then he rolled his eyes. "Some of the boards got scratched. The customer is acting like it's the end of the world." My father came out of the garage. "It's fine," he said. "They can deal with it." Kyle grinned at me. "See," he said. "No big deal." I watched the exchange, a costly mistake, the managed materials, a customer angry enough to threaten to complain. My father dismissed it like it was nothing. Kyle grinned at me. "See," he said, "no big deal." I opened my mouth, then closed it. If I said anything, I'd be the problem. If I stayed quiet, I'd still be the problem. That was the trick of it. Later that evening, I went to my room and closed the door. My phone buzzed, a call from my commanding officer, Commander James Porter, the man who signed off on my leave with a look that said he knew I'd rather be on duty. "Marina," he said when I answered. "You checking in?" "Yes, sir," I said. "How are you holding up?" Not the standard question, not small talk. He meant it. I hesitated. "It's fine," I said, and even to me it sounded like a lie. Silence hung for a second. Then he said, "Your discipline is not a flaw. Your clarity is not arrogance. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." My throat tightened. "Yes, sir," I said. He didn't push, just said, "Enjoy your wedding. Call if you need anything." Then the line went dead. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. Outside my window, the yard was dim, the porch light casting a pale circle on the grass. Somewhere in the house, my mother laughed at something Kyle said. I thought about Maggie saying the story had been told weeks ago, before I even arrived. I thought about the way people at church looked at me like they already knew who I was, like I had walked into a room with a label stuck to my back. I had spent years building a life where I was judged by performance and integrity. Here, I was judged by someone else's version of me. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The old doubt crept in, quiet and poisonous. Maybe I was difficult. Maybe I was too much. Maybe leaving had turned me into someone who did not fit anywhere. Then I remembered the way my mother had said it so easily. Trouble with social things. She means well. And I felt something shift. Not anger yet, not fully, but awareness. This was not just family tension. This was a campaign, polite enough to pass as concern, sharp enough to cut. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle. Tomorrow, there would be errands and schedules and smiles. Tomorrow, I would have to walk back into that church and hold my head up while people measured me against a story I never wrote. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but the air in the room felt thinner than it had the night before. Chapter 3. The night they decided I did not belong. Sleep came in shallow pieces, the kind where you doze just long enough to forget where you are and then wake up with the same tight feeling in your ribs. Every time I drifted off, a sound pulled me back, a cabinet closing, a floorboard creaking, a car passing on the road outside. The house did not settle the way a house should. It felt like it was holding its breath. At some point after midnight, I heard a soft click down the hall. Not loud enough to be a door slamming, just the careful sound of someone trying not to be noticed. I lay still and listened. Another sound, fabric brushing against something, then quiet. I told myself it was nothing. My mother getting water, Kyle raiding the fridge. The house was old, it made noises, and my brain was doing that thing it always did in this place, building a storm out of crumbs. I checked my phone, 2:14. I turned onto my side and tried again. My eyes burned, my throat felt dry. I kept replaying Maggie Pierce's words. The story had been told weeks ago. I kept hearing my mother say, trouble with social things, she means well, like she was reading from a card. By the time dawn pressed a faint gray against my curtains, I gave up on sleep. I showered, got dressed, and moved through the morning like I was already late to something. I helped my mother with errands because she asked, and because saying no in that house always came with consequences I could not predict. We picked up programs, checked on the flower delivery, confirmed the church schedule, and every step felt like another place my family could tighten their grip. Back home, my father was on the phone in the garage, talking about deliveries and invoices. Kyle was in the kitchen eating cereal straight from the box like he owned the place, because he did. My mother looked at me as I came in and said, "Try to relax today. I can tell you are wound up." "I'm fine," I said. She gave me a look that suggested I had proving her point. "Do not make that face, Marina. People are excited. We just need things to go smoothly." Smoothly, always that word. The rehearsal was scheduled for that evening. The wedding dress was stored in the small back room off the hallway, the one my mother had insisted was safest because it stayed cool and no one used it. When I arrived 2 days earlier, I had carried the garment bag in myself and hung it on a hook inside, zipped, covered, tucked behind old coats. I had done it like I was securing something on a ship. After lunch, I went to check it, not because I thought anything was wrong, but because my hands needed something to do besides clench. The hallway was empty. The air smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old wood. I walked toward the back room and slowed. The door was not fully closed. It was open just enough to show a thin line of darkness inside, like a mouth that had not decided whether it was about to speak. My heart gave a slow, heavy thud. I told myself Kyle probably grabbed a toolbox. My mother might have checked the iron. There were normal reasons. Still, I pushed the door open with my fingertips and stepped inside. The room was dim. Light slipped in through the thin gap in the blinds. The garment bag was still there, hanging where I left it, but the way it hung looked wrong, not straight, slightly twisted. The plastic cover on the side was crinkled, like it had been handled. I reached for the zipper. My fingers shook, just a little. I hated that they shook. When I pulled the dress out, the first thing I noticed was the seam along the bodice. It wasn't ripped wide, not dramatic. It was worse than that. It looked deliberate, a clean slice that followed the stitching. The fabric had been cut, then tugged, then left to fall back into place like nothing happened. I moved the dress in the light. Another cut, and another. Thread pulled loose along the waist. The lining separated from the outer layer. Whoever did it knew exactly where to do the most damage without making it obvious at first glance. It took me a full second to understand what I was seeing. Then my chest collapsed inward like something had been removed. I sat on the edge of an old storage trunk because my knees suddenly did not feel reliable. A noise escaped me, not quite a sob, not quite a breath. I stared at the dress and felt my throat tighten until swallowing hurt. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I wiped my eyes fast, angry at myself for needing to. My mother appeared in the doorway. She stopped when she saw my face. "What is it?" she asked, like she was already bracing for inconvenience. I held up the dress. Her eyes flicked over it. She blinked once. Her face barely changed. "Oh my goodness," she said, and her tone was light, almost rehearsed. "Did it snag on something?" "It's cut," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, thin and steady at the same time. She stepped closer, peered at the seam, then pulled back as if she didn't want the fabric to touch her. Maybe the hook tore it. These things happen. My father's voice came from behind her. What is going on? He walked into the room, Kyle behind him, still chewing. The three of them filled the doorway like a wall. I looked at my father. Someone cut it. He leaned forward, examined the seam for half a second, then straightened. It looks like an accident, probably got caught. Your mother told you that room was packed. It was not packed. I put it in here myself. I hung it up, I zipped it. This is not a snag. Kyle swallowed and shrugged. It's just a dress. People get married in jeans sometimes. I stared at him. My hands were gripping the fabric so hard my knuckles hurt. Do not, I said. I didn't raise my voice, but something in it made him stop smirking for a second. My mother touched my arm, gentle, the way you touch someone who was about to ruin a group photo. Please, Marina, do not do this right now. We have rehearsal tonight. People are going to be there. I can't handle a scene. A scene? I repeated. My father sighed, impatient. Fix it or get another one. Do not make this into something it doesn't need to be. My mouth went dry. My brain tried to find a place to set this where it would make sense, but there was nowhere. Only family members had been in this house. Only family members knew where the dress was. The door was closed when I left it. Now it was open. The fabric had been cut cleanly, more than once, in places that could not happen by accident, and none of them looked surprised. That was the part that made my stomach turn. Not the ruined dress, not even the cuts. The calm. I heard myself say, "Did you do this?" The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother's eyes widened just enough to look offended. Marina, why would you even think that? Kyle let out a short laugh. You're being dramatic. God, you always do this. You come home and act like everyone is out to get you. My father's jaw tightened. You're overreacting. I'm not having this conversation. Not today. Overreacting, dramatic, always do this. The same words, different day. My vision blurred. For a moment, the old doubt surged up so fast it scared me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it did snag. Maybe I'm seeing cuts because I want to see them. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm the problem. I held the dress up again and forced myself to look at the fabric like an officer, like someone trained to observe without emotion. The cuts followed seams. The thread had been picked in a straight line. The zipper had been pulled hard enough to stress the stitching. This was not a snag. This was a decision. I swallowed hard. This dress cost more than your truck payment, I said, and my voice cracked just a little. It's mine. It's property. Someone damaged it. My father's eyes sharpened. Do not start talking like that. Do not bring police into this house. I didn't say police, but the word had already formed in my mind, flashing bright like a warning light. Property damage, insurance, contracts, deposits, non-refundable venue fees, a whole wedding schedule balanced on something my family was treating like a torn napkin. My mother's hand tightened on my arm. Please, she said, if you call anyone, if you make this public, people will talk. We will look terrible. We, not me. My father pointed toward the dress like it offended him. You wanted all this attention. Now look what it brings. You and your big plans. You and your military posture. You think you're better than everyone. My breath left me in a slow rush. There it was, the real thing. Not about fabric, not about money, not even about the wedding. About me standing in a place they didn't want me to stand. Kyle rolled his eyes again. Just get it fixed. Quit acting like the world is ending. I looked at the three of them, my family, and something inside me went quiet. Not numb, not empty, just clear. They wanted me small. They wanted me grateful. They wanted me manageable. And they wanted me to accept damage as normal. I let the dress fall back into the garment bag with careful hands, like I was closing a body bag, and that thought made me feel sick. I zipped it up. The sound was loud in the small room. My mother exhaled like she was relieved I stopped. See, she said softly, that's better. I didn't answer. I walked down the hall to my bedroom and closed the door. My hands moved automatically. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed. I started folding clothes with sharp, precise motions. My heart was still pounding, but my mind had clicked into a mode I recognized. When something is compromised, you secure what you can and you get out. A few minutes later, I stepped into the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror showed my face swollen around the eyes, lashes damp, but my gaze was steady. I leaned closer, searched my own expression, waiting for the old shame to rise, the one that always said, "Apologize, fix it, be easier." It didn't come. What came instead was a hard, simple truth. This was never about a dress. This was about control. It was about erasing me and then acting offended when I noticed. I turned off the light, picked up my suitcase, and opened my bedroom door. The house was quiet again, but it did not feel like peace. It felt like a warning. I walked to the front door without making noise, slipped on my shoes, and stepped out into the humid night air. The porch light buzzed above me. The street was empty. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then stopped. I carried my suitcase to my car, set it in the trunk, and closed it gently. Then I got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb, like I had never lived there at all. Chapter 4. The Quiet Decision They Never Saw Coming. The road out of my parents' neighborhood was darker than I remembered. The streetlights spaced too far apart, the kind that leave long stretches of shadow between small circles of safety. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my stomach kept rolling like I was still in that back room holding ruined fabric. I drove until the familiar streets of Harbor Cove disappeared behind me, then kept going another 10 miles just to be sure I would not turn around out of reflex. The gas gauge dipped. The clock on the dashboard blinked 1:08 a.m. My phone buzzed twice on the passenger seat, then again, then stopped. I did not look at it until I pulled into the parking lot of a small roadside motel with a neon sign that said Sea Breeze Inn. Nothing fancy, just clean enough, quiet enough, the kind of place where no one asks questions if you pay with a card and keep your head down. Inside the room, the air smelled like detergent and ocean damp. The bedspread was stiff. The curtains were thin. It still felt like relief. I set my suitcase on the chair, then sat on the edge of the bed and finally looked at my phone. Missed calls from my mother, one from my father, 3 texts from Kyle, all short, all annoyed. Mom said, "Marina, call me now." Dad said, "Where are you?" Kyle said, "You are being ridiculous." I stared at the screen until the words stopped meaning anything. Then I opened Ethan's thread. There were 2 messages from earlier. Ethan said, "I had a feeling something was off. Are you okay?" Ethan said, "Tell me where you are. I am coming." My throat tightened. The warm part of me wanted to answer. The trained part of me knew if I answered right now, I would crack, and if I cracked, I might go back. I put the phone down and walked into the bathroom. The mirror over the sink was lit by a single bulb that made everything look harsher than it was. My eyes were rimmed red. My face looked like someone else's, someone who had been holding her breath for years and only now realized it. I turned on the tap, splashed water on my cheeks, then gripped the edge of the sink and took a slow breath. I needed a plan, not a fantasy, not a speech, a plan. I sat back on the bed and opened my contacts. The name I tapped was one I only called when I needed clarity, Commander Richard Hale. He answered on the second ring. "Lieutenant Caldwell?" "Sir, it is Marina," I said. A pause, not long, but enough to tell me he heard my voice. "Where are you?" he asked. "Off base, sir. I am safe." "Are you in trouble?" I looked at the patterned carpet, at the suitcase on the chair, at my own hands. "I am not in danger," I said, but my family crossed a line. He did not ask me to explain right away. He did not say sorry. He did not offer a soft landing. "Tell me what you need," he said. I swallowed. "My wedding is in 2 days. My dress was destroyed. I am trying to decide what to do without making this worse." "You cannot control whether they make it worse. You can control what you will tolerate." The words hit different than comfort. They felt like a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. I keep hearing my mother saying, "Do not make things uncomfortable," like my reaction is the problem. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. They trained you to think it is. That is not the same thing as truth. I closed my eyes. The room felt quieter. "I don't want a scene," I said. "Then don't make one," he replied. "Do something clean, something you can stand behind later." Clean, the same word my mother used, but from him it meant something else. It meant clear. It meant disciplined. It meant I wouldn't have to apologize for existing. Before we hung up, Hale added, "Rear Admiral Kendrick will be at your ceremony." My eyes opened. "Sir?" "He is in the area for a community event tied to the base. He asked about you when we spoke last month. He is attending as a guest, not as a spectacle, but I want you to know he will be there." Rear Admiral Kendrick, a man who did not hand out respect lightly. "Thank you, sir," I said, and my voice finally sounded like mine again. When the call ended, I sat there for a moment, letting the reality settle. My family had been building a story about me. Tomorrow, the whole town would be watching which version of me walked into that church. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. He answered immediately. "Marina?" he said, and there was relief and anger tangled together. "Where are you?" "I am at a motel off Highway 12, I said. "I am okay." "I am coming." "No," I said, sharper than I meant, then softened. "Not tonight. I just need to get through the next few hours without anyone watching me breathe. I needed space." He exhaled. "Did they do something?" "They ruined my dress," I said. Saying it out loud made it real in a way I didn't want, but I forced it anyway. Silence on the line, then Ethan's voice, low and controlled. "Do you want to call the police?" The question was practical, not dramatic. He was giving me options, not opinions. "I don't want my wedding to become a crime scene. I don't want sirens outside the church. I don't want my mother crying about embarrassment while everyone forgets what happened." "Okay, what do you want?" I stared at the uniform bag in the corner of the room, the one I had thrown in without thinking because I always traveled with it. Old habit, safety, a part of me that couldn't be rewritten by anyone else. "I think I know," I said. The next morning, after a few hours of restless sleep, I drove into Wilmington and sat in a small office across from an attorney named Grace Mullins. She was in her 40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back, no wasted movement. She didn't blink when I explained what happened. "Your dress is personal property," she said. "If you can document the damage and you have a receipt, you have a claim. If you can establish access was limited, that strengthens it. You also have potential civil options if there is financial loss connected to the event." I nodded, absorbing it like a briefing. "I'm not ready to file anything today," I said. "I want to keep my focus on the wedding." Grace steadied me for a moment. "That is allowed," she said. "You can choose timing. You can choose the kind of accountability you want. Just don't let anyone convince you that staying quiet means you agree with what they did." When I left her office, the air outside felt brighter, not because the situation had improved, but because I had named reality and understood my options. Back at the motel, I laid everything out on the bed like a checklist. The ruined dress stayed zipped in the bag, untouched, because I couldn't handle looking at it again. Next to it, I placed the uniform bag. I unzipped it carefully. Dress whites, clean lines, quiet authority. Not a costume, not a weapon, not a threat. A statement of fact. I ran my fingers over the fabric, checked seams, checked buttons, checked every detail like I always did before a formal event. I polished my shoes until I could see my own reflection in them, not because anyone would notice, but because I would. My phone lit up again, a text from my mother. "Please come home. Do not make this uncomfortable for everyone." No apology, no question if I was okay, just discomfort. Everyone. I set the phone down. That afternoon, I drove into the church for the rehearsal. Ethan met me in the parking lot. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either, but his eyes held steady. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "I am sure." Inside, people turned when I walked in, then looked away too fast. My parents stood near the front pews. My mother's smile faltered when she saw my face, like she expected me to arrive softer. My father's expression went tight. Kyle lifted his chin like he was already annoyed. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I moved through the rehearsal like a professional. Listen, respond, finish. No extra words. When it ended, I stepped back outside alone for a moment. The evening air was warm. The church doors behind me were heavy, painted white, familiar in a way that used to mean safety. I stood on the top step and looked out at the parking lot, the town, the pale sky. For the first time, I admitted something I'd never let myself say out loud. I no longer hoped they would understand. I no longer needed them to. I turned, walked back to the doors, and pushed them open without looking behind me. Chapter 5. Karma does not shout, it stands in the light. The sanctuary smelled like polished wood in old flowers, the kind of scent that clings to fabric and memory. Light spilled through the stained glass in soft blocks of color, and for a moment I stood just inside the doorway and let my eyes adjust. I had changed in the small room behind the office, the one the church kept for volunteers and last-minute fixes. The mirror there was narrow and unforgiving. I buttoned my dress whites with the same steady hands I used before inspections. I checked each line, each edge, each detail. Not for vanity, not for drama, but for clarity. If I was going to be seen, I wanted to be seen as myself, not the version my mother had been handing out like flyers. Ethan had met me at the side entrance. He did not try to talk me out of it. He did not ask me to soften. He simply looked at me, eyes steady, and let out a breath that sounded like relief. He told me I looked beautiful, and I could hear the meaning underneath it. Not beautiful like a picture, beautiful like a person who had stopped shrinking. When the coordinator nodded that it was time, I stepped forward. The room changed. It was not a loud reaction, no gasps that belonged in a movie. It was a silence that spread outward, a hush that moved through the pews like a tide. People turned their heads. They did not look away quickly this time. They looked, and then they understood that whatever story they had been fed did not match the woman standing in front of them. I kept my eyes on the aisle. I could feel my heartbeat, but it was not panic. It was presence. Near the front, my parents were seated on the left side. My mother's face went still in that way it always did when she realized she could not control the moment. My father's jaw tightened, as if he was grinding down words. Kyle shifted in his seat, restless, his knee bouncing, his expression caught between irritation and confusion. For once, none of it was aimed at me directly. It was aimed at the room, at the fact that they were no longer the ones defining what everyone saw. I reached the first step of the aisle, and that was when Rear Admiral Kendrick stood. He was in civilian attire, simple and formal, no performance in it. He stepped into the aisle with measured calm, the way authority moves when it has nothing to prove. Conversations died completely. Even the smallest whisper stopped. He looked at me and gave a nod that felt like a hand on my shoulder. He greeted me by name. He offered a quiet sentence of congratulations. He did not raise his voice. He did not make it about himself. He did not make it a spectacle. It was exactly the point. In that church, in front of everyone my family had been preparing, his acknowledgement landed like confirmation stamped onto paper. Not flashy, not cruel, just undeniable. Someone in the pews behind my mother shifted, then stood. It was Mrs. Talbot, the same woman who had asked if I was doing okay being back, the same woman who had looked at me like a problem waiting to happen. She stood and offered a small, respectful smile. Not apologetic, not dramatic, just honest. Her posture said she had recalculated, and she was choosing to meet reality instead of gossip. A few more people followed with similar gestures, small nods, softened faces, eyes that no longer searched for flaws. I could feel the narrative slipping away from my parents like sand through fingers. Ethan waited at the front, shoulders squared, eyes bright. When I reached him, his hand found mine. He did not squeeze like he was saving me. He held me like he was standing beside me. The ceremony moved forward, words about love and commitment and building a life. I listened, but I also watched. My mother kept glancing around, as if trying to measure the damage. My father stared straight ahead, rigid, the way he looked when he could not fix something and refused to admit it. Kyle shifted in his seat, restless, his knee bouncing, his expression caught between irritation and confusion. For once, none of it was aimed at me directly. It was aimed at the room, at the fact that they were no longer the ones defining what everyone saw. I reached the first step of the aisle, and that was when Rear Admiral Kendrick stood. He was in civilian attire, simple and formal, no performance in it. He stepped into the aisle with measured calm, the way authority moves when it has nothing to prove. Conversations died completely. Even the smallest whisper stopped. He looked at me and gave a nod that felt like a hand on my shoulder. He greeted me by name. He offered a quiet sentence of congratulations. He did not raise his voice. He did not make it about himself. He did not make it a spectacle. It was exactly the point. In that church, in front of everyone my family had been preparing, his acknowledgement landed like confirmation stamped onto paper. Not flashy, not cruel, just undeniable. Someone in the pews behind my mother shifted, then stood. It was Mrs. Talbot, the same woman who had asked if I was doing okay being back, the same woman who had looked at me like a problem waiting to happen. She stood and offered a small, respectful smile. Not apologetic, not dramatic, just honest. Her posture said she had recalculated, and she was choosing to meet reality instead of gossip. A few more people followed with similar gestures, small nods, softened faces, eyes that no longer searched for flaws. I could feel the narrative slipping away from my parents like sand through fingers. Ethan waited at the front, shoulders squared, eyes bright. When I reached him, his hand found mine. He did not squeeze like he was saving me. He held me like he was standing beside me. The ceremony moved forward, words about love and commitment and building a life. I listened, but I also watched. My mother kept glancing around, as if trying to measure the damage. My father stared straight ahead, rigid, the way he looked when he could not fix something and refused to admit it. Kyle shifted in his seat, restless, his knee bouncing, his expression caught between irritation and confusion. For once, none of it was aimed at me directly. It was aimed at the room, at the fact that they were no longer the ones defining what everyone saw. I reached the first step of the aisle, and that was when Rear Admiral Kendrick stood. He was in civilian attire, simple and formal, no performance in it. He stepped into the aisle with measured calm, the way authority moves when it has nothing to prove. Conversations died completely. Even the smallest whisper stopped. He looked at me and gave a nod that felt like a hand on my shoulder. He greeted me by name. He offered a quiet sentence of congratulations. He did not raise his voice. He did not make it about himself. He did not make it a spectacle. It was exactly the point. In that church, in front of everyone my family had been preparing, his acknowledgement landed like confirmation stamped onto paper. Not flashy, not cruel, just undeniable. Someone in the pews behind my mother shifted, then stood. It was Mrs. Talbot, the same woman who had asked if I was doing okay being back, the same woman who had looked at me like a problem waiting to happen. She stood and offered a small, respectful smile. Not apologetic, not dramatic, just honest. Her posture said she had recalculated, and she was choosing to meet reality instead of gossip. A few more people followed with similar gestures, small nods, softened faces, eyes that no longer searched for flaws. I could feel the narrative slipping away from my parents like sand through fingers. Ethan waited at the front, shoulders squared, eyes bright. When I reached him, his hand found mine. He did not squeeze like he was saving me. He held me like he was standing beside me. The ceremony moved forward, words about love and commitment and building a life. I listened, but I also watched. My mother kept glancing around, as if trying to measure the damage. My father stared straight ahead, rigid, the way he looked when he could not fix something and refused to admit it. Kyle shifted in his seat, restless, his knee bouncing, his expression caught between irritation and confusion. For once, none of it was aimed at me directly. It was aimed at the room, at the fact that they were no longer the ones defining what everyone saw. I reached the first step of the aisle, and that was when Rear Admiral Kendrick stood. He was in civilian attire, simple and formal, no performance in it. He stepped into the aisle with measured calm, the way authority moves when it has nothing to prove. Conversations died completely. Even the smallest whispers stopped. He looked at me and gave a nod that felt like a hand on my shoulder. He greeted me by name. He offered a quiet sentence of congratulations. He did not raise his voice. He did not make it about himself. He did not make it a spectacle. It was exactly the point. In that church, in front of everyone my family had been preparing, his acknowledgement landed like confirmation stamped onto paper. Not flashy, not cruel, just undeniable. Someone in the pews behind my mother shifted, then stood. It was Mrs. Talbot, the same woman who had asked if I was doing okay being back, the same woman who had looked at me like a problem waiting to happen. She stood and offered a small, respectful smile, not apologetic, not dramatic, just honest. Her posture said she had recalculated, and she was choosing to meet reality instead of gossip. A few more people followed with similar gestures, small nods, softened faces, eyes that no longer searched for flaws. I could feel the narrative slipping away from my parents like sand through fingers. Ethan waited at the front, shoulders squared, eyes bright. When I reached him, his hand found mine. He did not squeeze like he was saving me. He held me like he was standing beside me. The ceremony moved forward, words about love and commitment and building a life. I listened, but I also watched. My mother kept glancing around as if trying to measure the damage. My father stared straight ahead, rigid, the way he looked when he could not fix something and refused to admit it. Kyle looked down at his hands, then up again, then down, like he had lost the script. Nobody confronted anyone, nobody needed to. The truth was simply standing there in plain sight. After the ceremony, people filtered out to the courtyard for photos and polite congratulations. The air outside was warm, bright, almost too normal for what had just happened inside me. I shook hands, I accepted compliments, I smiled when appropriate. I kept my voice even, not because I was numb, but because I was done performing distress for people who would only call it traumatic. Rear Admiral Kendrick spoke with Ethan briefly, then with me again. He told me he was proud of the work I had done, and he said it quietly, like a fact that did not require an audience. Then he moved on. As he walked away, I saw my father watching him, eyes narrowed, as if trying to figure out how to reclaim control from a man he could not dismiss. My mother approached me near the edge of the courtyard, away from the densest cluster of guests. Kyle hovered a few steps behind her, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. My mother looked at my uniform, then at my face. She said my name like she used to when I was a kid, and she wanted me to behave. Soft, warning. I waited. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked unsure. Finally, she said she had not realized how much I would take it to heart. She said she only wanted things to go smoothly. She said people misunderstand. She said she did not mean it the way it sounded. My father stepped closer and cleared his throat. He said he had not wanted trouble. He said the dress situation had gotten out of hand. He said we should not make a bigger deal of it now that the wedding was done. Kyle muttered something about it being a joke, about me always taking things too seriously. They were offering me the same thing they always offered, a version of apology that made my feelings the problem, a version of peace that required my silence. I felt something in my chest tighten, not with sadness, but with recognition. I told them I was not discussing the dress in the courtyard. I told them I would not argue today. I told them what I needed from them moving forward. I said I would not accept being talked about as if I was not in the room. I said I would not accept being presented to the community as difficult so they could protect their comfort. I said if they wanted a relationship with me, it would require honesty and respect, not management. My mother's eyes filled with tears the way they always did when she wanted to shift the focus back onto her. My father's face hardened, like boundaries offended him. Kyle scoffed and looked away. I did not chase their reactions. I told them I loved them, and I also told them love was not permission. Then I walked back toward Ethan, toward the group of people who were congratulating us, toward the day I had promised myself I would not lose. Later, when the reception quieted and the last guests drifted out, Ethan and I stood alone for a moment outside the venue, the night air thick with salt and distant music. He asked me if I was okay. I thought about the ruined dress zipped into a bag somewhere, the legal consultation waiting if I chose it, the years of being told I was too much, too sensitive, too rigid. I thought about the silence in the church when I walked in, not shameful silence, but recognition. I thought about how my family's story had finally run out of room. I told him I was not magically healed. I told him some parts of me would probably always ache when I thought of home. But I also told him I felt lighter because I was no longer carrying a version of myself that was built to make other people comfortable. That night, when we finally got to the quiet of our own space, I took off my uniform carefully and hung it up. I did not do it like I was putting away armor. I did it like I was putting away a truth I could return to whenever I needed it. I did not defeat my family. I did not ruin them. I did not need to. I simply stopped losing myself. If you've ever had someone try to rewrite you, to shrink you, to turn your biggest moment into their comfort, I want to know what you did with that. Tell me in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, stay with me.